Hey, welcome to episode 7 of That's So Sketchy. We're gonna wait till a couple people show up, but yeah, the goal is to restart the series. I thought the recent topics were worth restarting this, so let's see where it all goes. Like I said, I'll just meander around for a few minutes till we get a couple more eyeballs. Had quite the sale event last night. Uh, Anybody from there still shows up here, really appreciate it. The goal tonight is to talk about the whole use of blank sketch cards question that's come up, kind of look at all the angles of it, sort of the history of how these were done in the past, this use of blanks, when it was okay, when it's not okay, blah, blah, blah. We got a lot to talk about. So yeah, fun stuff. I've invited a few people on. If you're in the comments and you want to come on, just let me know. Just send me a message in the comments, and then I'll sync up with you and send you a link. Would love other people, so it's not just me talking and talking. Thank you, Black Rose. Welcome. I spent 7.5 hours talking last night. I've heard more than enough of my own voice, to say the least. Yeah, and then actually let me do this and make sure I can get the second camera set up. Present extra camera. There we go. We'll get that over there as well. The goat. Get a work came into it. So yeah, rather than just drag this out too much, you know what? Let's just jump right into it. I'm not going to get a huge amount of lives. I think people will look at this after. Hopefully, it'll be informational, educational, helpful, amusing. Who knows? It's up a pock. So let's get into it. I've even got, look at this, even whipped up a little PowerPoint, mostly just so I would not get off track and lose the theme. Yeah, so the topic really is, I sort of summed up with the naughty side of sketch cards and how we look at this angle of you've got blank sketch cards. They exist whether we want them to or not. What do we do with them? Are there things that are inherently bad about these? How do we define that? Who defines it? There's a whole bunch to talk about. So yeah, let's just jump right in, because why not? So I stole some questions from Barry Roll with him, who had some good questions that I think can inform this decision or this discussion. Excuse me. And the first one he asked was, who is the initial target audience for sketch cards? Right before we get into this, what's up, Melf? So when you look back to the 1993 sets, particularly the Defective and Simpsons, sketch cards were a new thing. And in fact, only Defective called them sketch cards. They were art cards with the Simpsons. And Defective was the only one where they were actually pack inserted. The Simpsons were all redemptions. You got a card that said, hey, mail this in and you'll get an official card. And Groening would create them all sort of just in time. He'd get, a couple cards. He'd draw them, then they'd be mailed out. Whereas Defective Comics, he did them all ahead of time. They were inserted. So really, they were just a novelty in 1993 when they were introduced. And then the first ones showed up in Marvel in 97 in Fleer Ultra Spider-Man. There were 2 sets in 1998, the MCC and Marvel the Silver Age. And then they just sort of started sprinkling in more and more in sets. Legends 2002, the 3 masterpiece sets in 2007, 2008, which are the ones where they sort of became much more regular, box hits at that point. They were still rare in 2002. And they really also started in 2007 and 8, you still had a bunch of the comic artists, but you started to get introduced to non-comic artists, sketch card specific artists. And that's really continued to this day, where the comic creator side of it is extremely rare. We're going to see some of that with Platinum. But sketch cards have really just been a huge part of the hobby, just an important insert, really in every set. Whereas, some sets have PMGs, some have other manufactured inserts. Sketch cards have always sort of been consistent across all the different properties. And we have seen that they're becoming rarer and rarer as we go, which is a whole nother interesting topic, because even though they're changing now in 2024, the whole pay structure is still stuck way in the past. But we can talk about that a little bit later. So then Barry's next question was, well, how can we define sketch card collectors, right? And there's a couple different ways, really 4 sort of broad categories, right? There's one we've seen recently where it's just a currency for people, right? They collect these so that they can trade them for other things, which is actually where I started. I initially collected Marvel sketches to have ammo for Lord of the Rings sketches. And then I slowly transitioned over time and saw the light, as we say. There are some people who just collect the art. They don't care what it's on. They don't care if it's official, PSC, piece of wood. They just love the art. What's up, Adam? There's sketch card collectors who just focus on sketches and primarily the licensed sketches. And then there are set collectors who look at them as just part of the whole set collecting experience, right? It's just one other insert they need to have an example of when they're creating their binders. And I think a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight is focused on that third one, right? It's the people who are a little heavier into sketch cards, but there's definitely a smattering of number 2 and number 4 in all of these groups as well. Some people who just casually collect because they enjoy it, and some where it's just, I need to have some. So Philly as part of their whole binder. And again, there's no right or wrong way in how you collect sketch cards, as long as you love them. Just in general collecting them. We'll talk about whether there's any popcorn worthy issues around them. So one of the questions that came up is, are there ethics around sketch cards? So before we get into the meat of it, which is around the blank cards and the art side, it probably wouldn't hurt, since we've got some artists here, to talk about the business side, right? If we're going to talk about ethics, should we talk about this whole low pay per card and heavy focus on the artist proof model? Is that fair to the artists? Obviously, there's always a lineup of artists who are willing to do the work on this set. So, there's that whole, is the quote unquote exposure a real thing? I personally don't think it is. I think a lot of artists, at least once, is it nice to be able to put on your resume, hey, I worked for Disney or whatnot? Yeah, sure. But I don't think it justifies this low model. While it's a horrible thing that Topps is getting rid of APs, at least from my perspective as a collector, hopefully they will address the pay issue and pay people a little more to what they're worth. Boo, burn up. There you go. And yeah, I sort of got off topic with that last one, but we'll focus on that later. But before we get into it, let's talk about blank sketches. And I'm going to take us on a little journey back in time. And there's some Marvel side to this, but I'm going to focus where I know firsthand, which is back in the Lord of the Rings set. So let me drag this over here. I got to hide this for a second to do it. Let's make this the big screen. So in 2006, when the first Topps Lord of the Rings set called Lord of the Rings Evolution was released, they had sketch cards. And the vast majority of them were either pencil or just ink and pretty simple sketch cards, like this one from Otis Frampton, right? Gandalf, nice sketch. But what you could do at that time is the whole concept of an aftermarket was in existence at that time, meaning I was allowed, for now, Parnell going solo. I was allowed, if I had this card, I could go back to Otis and say, hey, Otis, I'd like you to either, ink and color this. So I got an actual one, but if it was that pencil, he was allowed to do that for a fee. Or he could say, I could say, you know what, Otis, I want something completely different. And he could, if he chose, erase his own work. And since it's his card, he was allowed to do a whole new scene if I wanted, right? So you go from that simple pencil sketch either to a new version of it or to a whole new concept that you wanted. And that was allowed. But some artists, hey, Jomar, some artists sort of played with the loophole, let's just call that, and really only put out fast sketches with the goal that they were going to make a ton of money sort of doing this. And that, I'm not saying Otis did that by any stretch, no. But there were some, and Topps quickly realized that they lost control of what was out there. So with the next set in 2007, they said, no more aftermarkets. You can't do that. So that was lost. But that, of course, didn't stop the issue because 2007 was a strong set and there weren't a lot of filler sketches. There were a lot of repeats, but some of the artists did really great work, like Grant Gould did a lot of repeats, but they were all very Warhol-esque. He did a lot of colors, so he did multiples, but each one was slightly different. A lot of people really loved that. But then we hit 2008, and in 2008, there were a couple artists, and again, no disrespect to them, who looked at this whole pay model and said, hey, you know what, Topps, for whatever it works out to be, I'll take, for your $1 or $2 a card, I'll take 2,000 sketch cards. And they did 2,000 sketch cards. And these were definitely sketches, right? You had Ryan Waterhouse, who did his infamous helmet head sketches, and Brent Woodside, who did these quick little pencil sketches. And what people realized, and there were others, Mark Probst did some cards that were in pencil, and he was willing to still do them after the fact. What a lot of people realized is, especially with Brent's cards, he didn't seal them with any fixer. So these 2,000 cards were more or less, with the simple use of a number 2 pencil eraser, were blank sketch cards. And you had lots of people who took advantage of that. And again, you could turn that card into this. And there's examples where someone like this, who wasn't on the set, took one of those and did their own art. There were other artists who were on the set who did others. And that's something we're going to talk about when we get to the questions that were posed in the group. Are any sort of more or less appropriate, I don't know what the right word is there, than others. But this issue, the whole point of this is this issue has been around since very early in the sketch card world. And there were many, many heated discussions back on Scoundrel around these particular cards in the Lord of the Rings days. And a lot of these same words were brought up then, unethical. I don't know if immoral was ever there, but there were definitely some strong words and people who felt their opinions were correct. And we're going to talk about that. So let's just go. Again, if anybody wants to join me, feel free. Me doing a 2-hour monologue is not something anybody wants. So where are we today? What kicked this off? I mean, this has been here for, like I said, since 2006. So what's that? 18 years? Is that right? 18 years? Wow, that's ridiculous. But there have been a few things recently that, Yeah, and Tony's right. Back then, because Tony was on that 2008 set. Yeah, and if you were caught doing that, and that happened to Mark Probst, um, he was doing some of those when per the contract he wasn't supposed to. Yeah, and there was a whole hullabaloo. And where today we have these discussions in Facebook groups and Discord, back then it was all done on Scoundrel. And there were plenty of not nice words that were hauled at everybody back then. But recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, we have seen a very marked increase in the number of sketch cards that are out there blank, right? Both artist proofs and pack inserted. And I'll talk about artist proofs and their history in a little bit, but to say, to summarize it, an artist proof is a card that an artist receives as compensation. It's a blank card, and it's denoted as an AP that they get to offset the low pay. And they're allowed to commission that directly to people. They can get a much higher rate on that. The hope is that will offset the hourly rate that they were getting for the other ones, and that'll get them to a good financial situation as a whole. Whether that always works, I'm pretty sure I can safely say that is not the case, and has probably led to a lot of the APs being sold, right? Because just think of it simply in these terms. If there's an artist out there who knows they can get $50 for a commission, or even say $100 for a commission, versus some artists who could get 400 or 500. So if someone goes to that artist and says, "Listen, I can either pay you $100 to do this card, or I'll be $100. You just give me the blank, and you don't have to do an hour or two of work. You're going to get the same money. Just don't do anything, and you're going to make that much more off it because you didn't have to put the time in." And for a lot of artists, just financially speaking, that's a good proposition. The other side of that, and where a lot of these problems have come recently, is we're also seeing a large increase of the pack inserted cards, so the non-APs. These are the cards that the artist is sent to draw on that are supposed to be returned to the company. We'll just use Upper Deck and all these examples so that they can be put into the packs. So the model is, I'm going to give you 50 cards and 5 APs. So artist is sent all of those. They're supposed to do the 50 cards, send them all back to Upper Deck. Upper Deck reviews them, either approves or denies the cards, and then at some point the artist will get a check for that. In some cases, it's been 2 or 3 year delays because of the set delays. So that's a whole nother side of the issue. But regardless, and then the artist is allowed to commission out the artist proofs to collectors. Those are also supposed to be approved. Typically, the contracts, and I have seen some of them say, when you do this, you have a 6-month window after the set is released to do these. Send them in to us. We will approve them under the same guidelines, and as long as they're approved, you can complete your sale. A lot of artists these days simply skip that process because the delays are ridiculous. Sometimes it takes well over a year for them to get approved. Between that and not getting their checks for years, it just drags out the whole payment process and just adds to the whole situation. So that's sort of what got us here. And we're seeing a lot of artists who get the contract and get the cards, and then whether they sign the contract and just ignore it, or they just don't sign the contract and keep the cards, they're not returning those cards to Upper Deck. They're either keeping them, and some artists very clearly are drawing on them directly and selling them directly to consumers. They're always pretty easy to see, because you see an artist selling 10, 15 of their own sketches, not on AP stock. It's pretty clear they kept the blanks. Or they're selling them to third-party brokers, who are then either using them themselves to create new cards. And that's sort of this one situation that's led to a lot of this. I'm not going to say the person's name because I'm not out to to get in any trouble for potentially shaming someone or that, but everybody sort of knows where that is. And because of the way it was done, there were a bunch of issues with it where at first a lot of the cards weren't clearly identified as being aftermarket. Some were incorrectly listed as APs. This person also had people copying stroke for stroke other artists' work without attribution. There are a whole bunch of issues that really drew a lot of the ire to this one person and really just caught this issue on fire. I just realized, sorry. Not that you want to see me big, but it's better than the black screen. So that really drove this whole issue to the forefront. But let's start off by saying, there's a lot of gray area in this. This whole issue is gray, but first question is there anything that's sort of absolute? It seems like there are a few things that very few people are going to disagree with. And based on the questions I put out there, these sort of stood out, right? And the two big ones are, okay, if you're not going to be honest about what you have or what you're selling, right, that's a problem, right? Lying and deception is always going to be a problem no matter what it is. So if you commissioned this card from an artist on non-AP stock and you try to pretend it's pack inserted, or you're silent as to it and hoping that someone won't know, I think we can all agree that, yeah, that's bad. You really should be disclosing what these things are. As far as what if you take this and you're swiping and copying art, which we saw. If you're doing a stroke for stroke recreation of someone's work and not, well, that in and of itself may be with or without attribution. That's probably a whole nother topic. But yeah, a lot of people would say, yeah, without any sort of attribution, that's a problem. But then the whole conversation started going around, well, what about just the simple act of, as a collector or an artist, using one of these cards outside of its, let's call it its intended purpose, right? Upper Deck created these products and they had a very clear vision of, we're going to make this many of this card, this many of this card. And within that, as part of the economy of the set, they knew they want a certain number of sketch cards from a certain number of artists. Give us one random positive thing now. I have the goat. There you go. Random positive thing. Thank you. And I totally lost my train of thought. Yes, the simple art of repurposing the sketch card. That's where I was. I've completely fallen off track here. Unreal. Right. If I want to do that, is there anything inherently wrong about that? Whether I am an artist who, again, uses it outside of that economy. That's what it was. Right. Because right off the bat, you could say, all right, well, there's, for artist Bob, right? I use Bob a lot in this. So if your name's Bob, I apologize, but that's the example I use. If Bob's an artist and Bob was commissioned to do 50 cards and 5 APs, is Bob doing anything to change that number in and of itself bad, right? Because you could say, well, Upper Deck only wanted 50 of your cards, Bob. So if you do more on pack inserted, that messes up what they wanted. So is that in and of itself bad? It's certainly contrary to what Upper Deck wanted, but the word bad, I just don't like the word at all, but it's a word that a lot of people throw around. But to me, if you're going to talk about what is quote unquote, sorry, Bob. Of course, Bob's in the channel. So sorry. That's hilarious. And so to me, the only absolute stance you could take if you want to be a purist is, okay, you really shouldn't do any extra cards, right? Because that's what the designer intended, right? To have only this set number. But I don't think I'm certainly not going to take that stance. I don't think anyone in the questions we asked in the conversation said that, no, this is always bad or wrong, right? No one, to my knowledge, said that. So then we get into, okay, well, what is the gray area, right? So we'll get into that second question. If you get a commission, I mean, so this is one of the questions we will get to, absolutely, Black Rose. That's in there. So what's up, Alonzo? We'll get into that in a little bit. And again, I'll keep saying it. If anybody wants to jump on and just be, and this is a great, Warner, let's bring this up a little later when we're talking about the aftermarkets specifically. I think that's a good point. And yeah, I mean, Tony, you're right. I mean, per the contracts, AP shouldn't be out in the wild, but they are, and here's where we are. So let's get into it. So I posted that list of questions, and we're going to go over them just to see if, again, is there any real difference between APs, non-APs, and all this? And yep, dark side, I think that's going to be a good side question when we get into some of this. What about the older ones where they don't have the license? But I do want to give real quick history of the artist proof, since we keep using this term, and because it has changed over time, and there was a lot of emphasis. There were a few people who specifically said, and when we get to it, that APs you can use however you want, it doesn't matter, because that they're not quote unquote part of the set. So if you go back to 2006, and again, I'm using Lord of the Rings. I think there were some comparable. I don't remember if Complete Avengers had the same issue or not, because it was Rittenhouse and not Topps, but let me use the Topps example. So at one point, these weren't even called artist proofs. These were called artist returns. So the way these worked is a very similar model with a twist. So an artist would be commissioned, and usually the number was for 100 sketches. So they would be sent 106. So the artist would draw on all 106. Then they would go through and they'd say, hey, these are my 6 favorites. So they would denote those 6 cards as the ones that they wanted to be returned to them. So they would all be sent in, and then, assuming nothing got lost in translation, assuming everything was approved, those 6 cards would then be returned to the artist, hence artist returns. And those precursors of artist proofs were actually highly sought after by some of the collectors. And there were some of the artist returns had some of the biggest and most costly battles out there for these cards, because again, they were the cards that the artists did and said, these are to me the best ones. So that really drove that. A lot of people these days now say, oh, you know what, I only do pack inserted, and APs aren't quote unquote real cards. But that's not at all how these sort of cards ever started. It was not completely, but for a lot of collectors, it was very much the opposite. So I think that's just worth pointing out, because it is interesting how over time the desirability has shifted to them being far less desirable for a certain subset of a collector. Interesting, Joe Marr. None of your ARs were ever returned. Ugh, that's not good. It could be a whole another episode about everything that's gone wrong over the years. But let's get into some of the questions. And again, feel free to post what you think in the comments. I sort of know what some of the answers we didn't get. There was no statistically sound sample that would be able to draw any conclusions. So I'll just talk about the few comments I saw, but I think it's interesting. So, and again, sorry, Bob A. No offense with these. It was just an easy name to type quickly. So Bob gives me a blank pack inserted card, right? So one that was supposed to be drawn on and returned to Upper Deck, but somehow Bob got it and he gives it to me as a collector. If I use it to commission art from a set artist, is right off the bat, is that a problem? Like, doesn't matter whether I disclose it, as we'll talk about in a second, or not. Is the fact that I am trying to increase the denominator for that artist's number of cards, right? I go to, I take it and I go to, I'm trying to think of a name who's not going to be in here. Oh my God, Socrates the artist. And I say, Socrates, you did 50 cards. I love them. Here's a blank pack inserted. Do work on it. Is that problematic? And if so, is it problematic that I even asked? So I'm doing something wrong by even asking it? Is the artist doing something wrong for accepting that commission and doing it? And then does it change? And then does that question change if I am always crystal clear? If I show it, I say, hey, this was a aftermarket, which is the term we often use. If a sketch was modified after the fact, we often call it an aftermarket or unofficial. So if I post it on Discord or on Facebook and I say, hey, this card is by so-and-so, it's unofficial, it's an aftermarket, does that make it okay? Because I'm making it very clear what it is. And most people, this was probably one of the more contentious ones. And I think it is because of the fact that these cards, forget whether packet AP should be out there, these cards per the contract, there's no question, they shouldn't be out in the wild. An artist is, assuming they signed, and I'm not sure if, in theory, right, you should get the contract and sign it before you get the cards, but I've heard some artists say they get the contract with the cards. So let's assume that the artist signed it, and by not returning them, there is obviously some violation of the contract. I'm not going to get into how that should be handled. That's on Upper Deck. That's their contractual issue. But does that make sense that that's a problem? Most people thought, well, you know what, it probably shouldn't be out there, but it seemed like as long as you disclose, and that's the word that's going to come up over and over in all of this, that's probably less of a problem. Again, no one's ever saying, oh, these things are, well, some people did, that these things are always right or always wrong. But most people thought, again, with a lot of these disclosure. And dark side, that's a great point. When you think about the economy, meaning the numerator, those numbers were actually known. And people chased them based on that, especially because you knew there were some super rare artists. Lord of the Rings, I'll use that example again. In Lord of the Rings Masterpieces 2, René DeLiz only had, I believe, 13 pack inserted cards and 2 APs. So if you have a high-end rare artist like that, is it different if that denominator increases versus, the artist? Okay, this artist did 2,000, right? If I get one of these pencil ones and I go to him and say, hey, I want another one of these, does adding this denominator go from 2000 to 2001? Is that somehow different in the economy than me going to the quote unquote higher end artist and saying, hey, I want your denominator to go from 13 to 14 because, hey, I know some idiot named Matt bought one of your sketch cards for $1,500, so I know these are valuable. Again, I'm throwing these questions out there. I'm hoping some people in chat will comment because I have no one to. So, no, I do have someone now. Look at that. Look who's here. Dolly Parton's biggest fan. Woo! What's up, Tony? Change this. There we go. I don't know. Is that the Perna shuffle?
Yes. No, you're making a lot of great points.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to actually make it a point as opposed to just throwing questions out there too.
but you also have to factor in the artists doing set amount of cards for a set, okay?
Yep.
And the company holding back some of the sketch cards for employees there that are never getting pack inserted.
Yep.
Because that has happened many times.
Yep. And there definitely was, there were some sets, like the premier sets, they had cards actually designated as employee rewards.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, for both quality control, we know sketches are held back. While I don't know this about Upper Deck, I have absolutely seen definitive examples that Cryptozoic held back sketches that were sold directly or out of the back door.
Yep.
And I'm pretty sure I've heard some stories about the one with T. But I have not heard anything. The good news is I haven't heard anything about that at all with Upper Deck. So it seems like that particular side path is closed. So bravo on them for doing a good job, or at least sounds like they've done a good job with that.
And here's another thing with Upper Deck. For example, Iron Man 2, the set.
Yep.
So artists did whatever amount of sketch cards for the set, and that set got really delayed, and the payments were really late. But the art director at the time, to compensate, threw in extra APs. So if I was supposed to get only 5, I ended up getting 15.
Yeah.
Which almost equaled the amount of cards I did for the set.
Yeah. I mean, and that's been an issue again back since Tops. I mean, so with Masterpieces too, I think you remember there were waves, right? So there was the first wave, but then they didn't have enough for all the boxes. So more artists got more cards and were given additional APs for that. And then there were some artists, Stephen Miller made a comment that he worked on other sets for Tops and was given Lord of the Rings blanks for APs as compensation for those.
Yeah.
So he didn't even do more Lord of the Rings cards, but he was given those blanks. And there were quite a few artists I remember who got those. And that knocked a few people off their high horses back in the day when they said, "Oh, this guy's doing aftermarket." He's like, "No, I got this directly from them. These are my cards, my compensation."
Exactly. Yeah, and that's another thing too. I think if there's going to be any blame thrown out, I think these companies that produce the sets are definitely part to blame for what's going on within the industry. They're not doing their checks on the artist. They're not, they must see this stuff out in public.
Oh yeah.
They do see it, and either they turn a blind eye to it, or it doesn't matter, or maybe in their head, it's more publicity for them.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah. And I mean, look, at a high level, I'm just going to say it, this really shouldn't be that hard, right?
No, it shouldn't.
It's if you keep a spreadsheet, all right, I have 100 artists and I just put down how many I sent to them. And when I get a package back from him, I put how many I received. And if that number is smaller than the first number, time for a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's really no reason that they should not know where the leak is. Right. Yep. But I think part of the problem was with COVID, which was really about when this started. There was a lot of turnover. It's entirely possible that with all that turnover, maybe some of those cards got out through the back door, and I'm sure they print extras. They've tried to work around it by numbering the cards, but Warner pointed out in the thread how easy it was with the little isopropyl alcohol to erase the identifier. But again, it's why do that when a simple spreadsheet will work?
Yes.
And if you send cards to an artist and they say, "Oh, I can't finish them in time," okay, well then you owe me every one of those cards back. And if you don't, there should be some teeth in the contract to say, okay, if you've kept them all, you know what? Hey, I don't know what it is. I don't want to give them any ideas, but there should be some consequence, right? I'm not doing their job for them.
I'm not helping them out. Screw them.
Exactly.
I'm not getting paid.
Yeah. So yes. So Ghost. Yes. I don't know that we know for sure, but I would be surprised if there weren't. Yeah, definitely, but held back for replacements for sure.
I know there's another company that actually held stuff back because they made master sets for themselves of all the artists
Yeah.
that worked on the set. So, I
Yeah.
mean, never going to see the light. So, and
No.
I'm sure they picked the best cards too.
No, they don't. They would.
Of course they did. Yeah, they kept all the water houses and watersheds or whatever.
Would a trip to the factory be like, um, I don't know. They don't print their own cards. So and most of theirs are, once they're released, they're stored at ComC. So it'd be interesting to see the ComC factory. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
but there's got to be things to steal though.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, again, with
Big pockets.
yeah, and who was it? It wasn't one of the producers, but it was ComC just sued two employees for theft.
Hmm.
Yeah, if you just Google it, it's out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, finally some teeth with addressing issues in the hobby, and a shout out to Manu for bringing a lot of that to the forefront with the whole comic side of the issue.
Manu's a beast. Him and Dave, they both they ran with it. They they brought it to light. Right. And if it wasn't,
they were from some corners, they got a lot of shit for it. So I give them a lot of credit for doing, shining the light on that.
Yeah. Good for them. I think it was something that needed to be exposed.
Yeah, and Humpty, another great point. Like, as simple as a label, a tamper-proof label could also solve the issue, right? There's like, you have one of your old ones, Tony?
I'm trying to see if I have one here. Yeah. So
yeah, let me make you big there so everybody can see. Put you over there.
Hey, look, my name's on there.
Yeah. I mean, obviously those cards were bigger, the 4x5, so it was a little easier to find the real estate on the back. But what's up, Tim? Just that spreadsheet. There's just some, and maybe there's something we're just not seeing, but it seems like there's some easy workarounds here. But there aren't, and they're out there. So we're asking, what's going on?
And another thing, here's another story. I once saw an artist who worked on a set, same set I worked on, and he was selling his blank APs because he couldn't get the amount he wanted for commissions, or was having a hard time commissioning them.
Yeah, no, that's one of the things I talked about earlier from an economic perspective. If an artist can only get $50 to draw on it, and someone comes and says, "I'll give you $100 to not do any work on it,"
exactly,
it's kind of a no-brainer, right?
Yeah, but what happened was I contacted Upper Deck and I said, "Listen, I go, if I come across any APs from an artist that," and I knew who the art director was. I said, I really hate to see these in the wild. I said, if I bought them, would that be okay? Because I was on the set. And they actually said, yeah, go for it. So because I was a part of the original set, they were okay with me, getting them. And at least it was an artist with APs. I had more APs than I should have, but.
Right. So that'll tie into question 3 and 4. And that's where, I think a lot more people were much more liberal with the concept of, if these are APs we're talking about, then for exactly the reason you just said, it's less of an issue because a lot of people don't consider them to be part of the real set, right? And I use real as how they describe it, not my own take.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's more of a relation to that set, a connection to that set, but more of helping out the artist. This is what the artist is trying to sell. This is his income. This is where he's making his money.
Yep.
Yeah, I can see that. It's the regular blanks that make me a little nervous and itchy when I see them out.
Yeah. No, Trevor, you're right. I mean, unfortunately, that's exactly how we saw that. That's George was the art director at Cryptozoic, and unfortunately, when he passed, he had apparently been holding on to some rejected sketch cards, and those made their way into the market. good, bad, or indifferent. So we will see. Yes, the goat is there. There you go.
Yeah. And I can understand artists getting frustrated too with some of these companies. Like I've heard horror stories where, and Topps is a prime example. They want all the cards sent back to them. They want you to mark your return cards. But sometimes I don't know who's doing the process of separating them, but they don't get separated and they get inserted. And then the artist kind of gets upset and they're like, okay, well, we'll just send you, extra APs or whatever. But, if something as simple as that can be overlooked, I mean, what other stuff's going on?
Yeah. So back to the pack inserted. I think this was pack inserted are the ones that sort of feel a little fuzzier than the APs in those discussions. But then the question becomes, okay, well, and we'll talk about AP and pack inserted because these are going to be the same questions as second, but with APs. Is it different if, for example, I take one of these and I give it to this person who wasn't on the set at all, right? Is that worse than when I give, and just forget that they're on different sets for a moment, when I give one of these, but I give it to Otis, the same artist, and he does that. So is this inherently less good, let's say, than this one?
Well, in my opinion, going back to when I started doing sketch cards, you had to earn the right to do sketch cards for these companies. Okay. You had to work hard. There were other people that wanted to do them. They picked whoever they picked. So any return cards, APs, whatever, were due. Okay. Now, if you have an artist who's never worked for these companies, gets a hold of a blank card, so he didn't have to do the work to get the APs or the returns. He's been given a blank card, charges $300-$400 for it. Customer's happy. Well, this guy just bypassed everything. Mm-hmm. Is doing better than what I'm doing because I have to work for this to get that, and it just didn't seem fair.
Right. Yeah. And I think that was the issue. Yours, you had to do 10 pack inserted. Yep.
Exactly. So I think that's what the issue is, where a lot of artists were kind of getting ticked off, and like I know back then, like I said, it was a witch hunt. If artists found out that, oh shoot, this artist wasn't on the set, and they got a hold of some returns or blank returns or whatever, or erased them, and they're painting on them and selling them. Well, why should they have to do that? Why did they get the easy ride into getting these? I almost want to say coveted, because they were coveted back then. They were something big.
Yep.
And I do remember the auction wars people were having, and I thought this was nuts when I first got into it. I never thought sketch cards would go for, and this is back then, $300-$400, and I'm like, are you insane for a drawing? And the prices now are just insane, but yeah, I think that's what it is. I think a lot of it is people don't mind if it's the artist that worked on the set. I think it's those non-artists that were not a part of the original set that get a hold of these blanks by whatever, getting it commissioned or buying it themselves. And like I said, just bypasses the line and moves to the front of the line and says, yep, here's my take on it.
Yep. Now, again, so in all of these, there's always different use cases you can go. And I think this talks to just how complex this issue is. So we talked about, okay, this guy was not on the set, so that makes sense. This guy was, so that's good. What about if I let's just pretend this was a different artist, this guy. So what if I gave this blank to this guy?
Oh, I like that one.
Who he's not on this set, but he did do a set 2 years ago. Does that change it? He didn't earn it for this set, but he already did the work up there. Does that change the equation at all?
No, that's a good question. Because
right?
No, that is a good question.
Yeah.
Officially, he is an official sketch card artist. If
just
he
not for that
set, but just not that set. Yeah, exactly. I'd like to pass.
Exactly. I'd like to phone a friend.
Yeah, really gonna call a friend.
Right, but that just goes to it, right? And I mean, your opinion may not. Warner may have a completely different opinion. Somebody might say,
this is totally
no,
this is
you know
totally
what?
for me. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
it
not saying
might
I'm
be. You
right.
know what? No, that's bad because you have to earn it for that set. Other people would say,
Yeah.
well, you know what? You put your time in, so that's okay. And then and then okay, well, how did you get it? Were you given it as compensation from the company? Okay, well then that's okay. But well, you got it from that crazy collector Matt, and who knows where he got it? Is that a problem?
I want to know.
Yeah, right. I got it from the goat.
That is a good question. Yeah, because that kind of shakes it up a bit. Well, yeah, they are an official artist, but they didn't happen to work on the set that you got this card from, but they have worked for Topps, and they're an employee of Topps.
And then you want another twist?
Oh,
what if I give it to an artist who has twice submitted 50 cards, been invited to the sets, put in 50 cards, each time all their cards were rejected?
That hurts.
They put in the effort, they put in the time and the effort and the work.
Yeah, that hurts.
But for whatever reason, someone at UD or the guy at Disney was like, I don't like these. Would it be okay if you gave it to them? Because they put in the work, they just didn't get that right.
Do it out of spite.
Like we can dig into every little use case.
Well, the question is, did they get paid for the rejected cards?
No, but that's a whole problem in and of itself. Okay. No, you don't get a dime for a rejected card.
Wow.
But I've heard different use cases. I know one guy where they were rejected and they wouldn't give him the APs. They had to send it back. But I knew another who was rejected, but the art director said, you know what, you can keep your 3 APs because you put in a lot of effort.
You know what? And you just said it. I think the art director makes a big difference in the scenario, depending on who you're dealing with. Yeah, that's actually makes you think.
Right? It's all
don't make me think.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's just so many rabbit holes. That's it.
Yeah.
And then And again, even here, you and I, we're 2 opinions out of 10,000 collectors in Marvel, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And ultimately,
I think the reason why I have more of a stake in it, and I think because I'm more passionate about it, is because I do have a small trading card business.
Exactly.
And I would hate to see this with my cards. Like, I mean, I think I would get ticked off if there was especially if there was an artist that, say, I don't want to say a terrible artist, but they didn't make the cut for our set. And maybe we said, okay, we'll keep you on file and maybe we can use you in the future. But if all of a sudden they're showing APs of the set that they weren't on and they've never worked for us, and I'd be like, what the hell's going on here? That would make me want to hunt down, okay, where'd you get these? Now, can I trust some of these artists that work for us? And then that's a whole new scenario for me. And it's like, I don't want to have this mistrust with the artist, because bottom line is the artists help us sell the sets.
Well, I mean, but that's a great segue. So we talked about how, in theory, it should be so simple for UD, right, with the spreadsheets. Have you found, being a small business owner who does this for a living and has I assume you have a slightly smaller roster than UD does. Have you had problems keeping track of these things, or is it as easy as I sort of made it out to be? Because what you send out, what you get back.
No, honestly, there are still some artists who agreed to be on our sets. They got the blanks, they confirmed it, and then we've never heard from them again. And we never got the cards back. And I still try to contact them, and they're just missing in action. I don't know if something happened to them physically or something they wanted to do. I have no idea. We tried to keep, we literally have a sheet of all the artists' names and all the cards they have and how many APs they're due. And, sometimes that'll change because an artist, all of a sudden, they'll send the cards back and they were down for 20. We don't have to even ask for a big number. Like 20 is the most we ask for. But they're supposed to be doing 20, and then without letting us know, we get their cards back in the mail, and they only did 10. And then 10, 10, I'm like, okay. But at least they sent everything back. Everything's
right.
Yeah, everything's accounted for, which is okay. It's the ones where, okay, well, here, I just sent these ones. These are the ones I did, and I kept the blanks. It's like, no, you don't keep the blanks. You send everything back.
So that is interesting to hear that even on a smaller scale, it's still a problem.
It happens.
Yeah.
It happens. And you know what? And the things too, I empathize with a lot of these artists too, because the pay rate does suck on these major sets. We're a small company. We try to be as competitive with the bigger companies, and we don't have deep pockets like them. And I can understand why some of them do get frustrated, fed up, and say, you know what, I'm going to do whatever I want with these blanks, because it's not worth it for me to go through the headaches with Upper Deck. And it's true, they're or not even Upper Deck, but even these companies where payment is often delayed.
Yeah.
They have the work. You've done your work. You spent your time doing that work, but the compensation's not there.
Yeah. And not just the compensation's not there, but the payments are so delayed.
Yeah.
I know one artist who he told me point blank, I have a bunch of blanks for the set, and I'm just going to commission them directly from people because Upper Deck is 6 checks behind on me and owes me almost $2,000. And it's now been, the oldest one is almost 3 years at this point.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Can you really blame them? Right?
Yeah. And there's no excuse for a company to be behind once they've had the products. I mean, you're a huge company. You've got licenses for major, products. There's no excuse for not paying your artists, especially when you're paying them next to nothing.
Yeah. Sorry, Warner. Yeah. As much as we would love the phlegm, we appreciate you keeping that.
Ew.
Yeah, I mean, so when your favorite artist is done with sketches due to the pay rate, and the flooding, yeah, I mean, that's no good. All right, well, we talked about. Let me put this back here a little. We talked about this a little bit. Again, this is. I hope I was on the right one. This one was a little more unanimous in terms of the responses. In fact, I think all the people who took the time to respond said, you know what? If it's an AP card for whatever reason, and I think the two trains of thought were, okay, the AP is compensation, so the person who receives that compensation can do whatever they want with it, right? That the blank AP is no different than they were handed a $100 bill, right? That is your money. You do what with it what you will. And the other train of thought from I think some of the people who were more I don't even know what it is. The other opinion was, you know what, APs don't matter in the greater picture of the set because they're not part of the quote unquote official set. So who cares what they do with them, right? And there was an interesting take, especially on number 4, that if it's okay to give the AP to someone who's on the set, but I think Booth went so far as to say, and again, not saying this is right or wrong, this is his opinion and it's completely valid. Mm-hmm. He said giving an AP to someone not on the set is a waste, right? Because that's no different than giving them a PSC. Why wouldn't you instead give the AP to someone who's on the set? Because at least it ties in there. And I can certainly see that opinion.
I can understand the collector being a purist.
Yep.
If somebody wants to do, okay, no, I'm following the rules. This is the artist list. These are the artists that worked on the set. These are the cards I'm going to collect. And then Joe Schmo comes on and says, well, look, I have an AP from that set. I wasn't on the set, but I was able to get my hands on it.
Yep.
I think it's totally up to the person. I'm more against the inserted cards than I am APs. Because inserted cards is part of that set. It's part of the base cards, the chases, that it's
yeah. And you designed it and you did the math. So okay, if I'm doing this many packs, I need this many cards, and that's what you commissioned.
Exactly. But with APs, see, that's another gray area. Is this person keeping the AP for themselves? Is it an artist that they really, really like, and that they're kind of miffed that they don't do sketch cards? Because I've seen artists bring blank cards to comic book artists that were never on any trading card sets, but it's only because they're a big fan of the artist.
Yep.
Would I be tempted to do that? I would. Unfortunately, I would
Yeah.
if I came
We're all
across,
going to be honest, right?
yeah, if I came across Mark Silvestri and I had a blank Marvel AP, I would be tempted just to say, "Can you do a head sketch of Wolverine on this for me?" And keep it for myself. It's mine. It's going into my collection. I'm
Yeah.
not going to resell it. No. But I think I would be a little hesitant to say, "Oh, I got this blank inserted card. It's, I kind of held a few back from that I got." And, maybe if you want to, then I think it's more like I'm hiding it from people as opposed to with an AP, I might show it
Mhm.
because it's an AP, but with a regular inserted card blank that an artist drew that's not on the set, I'd be more like, oh, I shouldn't really be doing this. This is really against the rules. I should know better. I'm just going to keep it for myself.
Or, or if you went so far as to say, you know what, maybe I feel there's something I shouldn't have done. But if you're upfront with it, does that change? If you're like, listen, this is pack inserted, this guy wasn't on it, but I wanted it. I'm telling you all right now, this is unofficial. I'm writing on the back that it's unofficial,
Right.
right? And if I ever sell it, I will make sure that the buyer knows 100% that it's unofficial, right?
Yeah, I think intent is a big part of it. I mean, if you're hiding it and or making it out as something it's not, yeah, here's this artist. Yeah, oh yeah, no, this is from the official set. Well, was he an official artist? Well, I think so. Well, but as opposed to, I love this artist's work. I'm not a larger art collector. I'm a trading card collector. Um, I know he wasn't officially a part of the set, but this is going into my collection. So,
And then you know what, I can think of it just because I love throwing out all these ridiculous examples.
no,
We talked about this one where it's like, well, he wasn't on this set, but he was on this set. What about going as far back as other company sets, right? What if I took this and it's an AP and I said, hey, Bill Sienkiewicz was on Fleer Ultra Spider-Man 97. He was on a Marvel set. Is he fair game? Right? You can take these examples to super extremes.
well,
Art Adams did 10 for a set. He's a set artist.
yes, he did. Art Adams did do 10%. I think I think the bottom line is you can convince yourself it was right in any situation.
Yeah,
But then
absolutely.
in every situation, you can convince yourself it was wrong.
You pretty much went to the end of my presentation right there.
Oh, shit, I'm sorry.
No,
All right,
that's.
well, have a good night, everybody.
I don't think everybody's going to be surprised that that's where I was going. I mean that's in some ways this is kind of accurate, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Again, I'll get to sort of some of my overarching thoughts, but again, I've said it in that thread, and I don't think it's going to surprise anyone hearing some of my responses here.
But you know what? I hope it's the intent to deceive. If you intend on deceiving somebody,
Yeah,
you're in the wrong.
yeah.
If you just
And I
come
don't
out and
think
say,
anyone's going to argue that.
yeah, if you come out and say, listen, this person wasn't on the set, but I love their work, so it's part of. I wanted them to do it. I'm telling you publicly, so no witch hunts, please. I'm being totally upfront with this.
And this is sort of a segue off of the main conversation, but it is sort of what drove a lot of these issues with that one collector who was getting carbon copies of existing sketches. And at least initially wasn't being, I don't think they were lying, but they weren't fully disclosing, I think is the
I love that Mad Max movie. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So yeah, there we go. So here we go. I have a sketch for Fussum 97 and ask Mission Tom Morgan to do a surfer on a blank for me. For a sketch, you mean a blank sketch?
I can't be friends with you, Norrin. I'm sorry.
Well, that's actually one of the questions I asked later. Like, if someone does something that you think is quote unquote unethical, would you go so far as to be like, I can't be friends with you?
No, I could still be friends with him. You know what? And Norrin collects surfers, so it's totally for him. So, good on him.
You're my friend, Tony.
My friend. Yep.
So yeah, I think again, a lot it just shows with the APs a lot of the questions there. Oh, what if I clicked? And yeah, we talked about this. It all comes down to disclosure, right? If you've got one of these cards and I'm crystal clear, I'm like not pack inserted, not official. They were either on the set, but I got the card somewhere else. Just be totally clear about the origins of the card.
Yeah.
Is that enough? And pretty much to a T, everybody said, you know what? As long as you're disclosing, that's the best case scenario. Even if I disagree with how you got it, as long as you're disclosing, you're not a total sleaze, you're only a partial sleaze because I disagree with how you got the card or something. Like that.
Yeah, they're being upfront about it, so there's nothing unethical about it.
Yeah. Whereas this one, and this was my layup question, if you are purposefully withholding or flat out lying about something, obviously that's a problem. That's never good in any situation. So
yeah, that's an intent to deceive. So no, that's wrong. And that's probably somebody who wants to get either a really good price on it. They're probably trying to sell it again.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, bad wizard.
This person's super rare. They did only a few cards. Yeah, that's just building up the lie.
Right. But so the flip side though is I can see, right. Let's not kid ourselves. If these things also personally impact your economics, that's going to change your view. Let's go back to that Lord of the Rings example where for Renee DeLiz, where she only did 13 cards.
Yes.
And I happen to have 5 of them.
What?
Yeah. So, and I know. So I know those cards are worth like $1,500 a piece.
Yes,
if someone sent her 10 blanks and she did 10 more and it drives down the value of my cards, I mean, let's be honest. When it's much easier to think something's wrong when it impacts your wallet, right?
Now, would it devalue your cards though? Because wouldn't she?
Well, it would be easier to get them, right? In that example, right? I sort of have, not intentionally, but I'm sort of a roadblock to anyone who wants those because
but you also have originals with the original dates on them. Whereas if she did something new, wouldn't she have to date him?
She wouldn't have to. No, that's the thing. Would in this whole discussion we want them to? Yes, and a few people pointed that out and said the real best way is to not just disclose it, but to actually note it on the back. So then it doesn't matter. Like if I'm hit by a bus, I mean, I'm a weird example because I actually have files on my computer that specifically talk about, hey kids, I'm dead. Here's what you need to do with these cards. And here are the notes about them. Not everybody does.
Tony Perna.
Yeah, exactly.
Come on, the Tony Perna.
But yeah, so if that's the easiest way to do it, because then there's no question, unless of course you use Warner's trick with the isopropyl alcohol, it's denoted there. So there's no chance that someone's not going to know it. And I think that's a great idea. And I think that's one of the best ones that was thrown out there. I don't remember whose idea it was, but I think it was either F. Booth or Eugene. And I completely am on board with that idea. I think it's a great way to make sure that the intent of disclosure isn't lost, that if the card makes a couple trips down the line, because it would be very easy for me to sell this to you and say, hey, this is an aftermarket, and then you sell it to, let's just ruin Bob again, you sell it to Bob and you tell Bob, hey, I don't think this was official. And then when Bob goes to sell it, he's like, did Tony say something? Or it's telephone, right? And it gets lost somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
Where if it's on the back, okay, zero question. So I think that's a great, I don't want to call it compromise. Solution's a better word for some of the questions.
Well, it's a good train of thought to follow. Yeah, I mean, did you know that aftermarkets were allowed on the first Marvel Masterpieces 2007?
Yes, I knew they were then, and also for the Evolution 06 for tops. Yeah, right. But then those immediately got kiboshed, and I think Topps was the only one who did those. I don't think Topps Fleer. I don't think Rittenhouse ever allowed them, to my knowledge. Right?
No, it was actually in the contract. No aftermarkets allowed.
Right. So yeah, common practice and collectible and preferred preference, right? There's no right way to collect, and anyone claims to know the best way of collecting is wrong. Again, a couple slides later, I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Um, yeah, let's see.
Now, do you think that we're getting to the point of no return where it's never going to go back to where it was, that people are just going to keep doing what they want to do with these blanks, and it maybe even get worse? I don't know. Maybe start making counterfeit blanks.
I think that's certainly possible if there was enough money to be made. But where was I going with that?
You were going to change your will to
There you go, to Tony.
Tony Perna.
Sorry, I read this question and I completely got.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to sidetrack you there.
No, that's fine. I wanted to answer yours, and I looked at this, and my brain just went. Well, anyways, so Tim, in that case, my intent on owning all 5 is because I love it, and if I could own all 13, I'd own all 13. It's not a financial thing. It's that I love them, and I think she did some amazing work. That's why I paid that much. But yes, I do know people who stack, not necessarily who have come out and actually said they do it because they want to be the person that has to control that market. For me, again, do I happen to with 5 or 13? I suppose, but I don't know that there are enough people still collecting those who would want them that it makes that much of a difference. But yeah, I mean, if it was to manipulate a market, again, that comes back to the question: what's my intent? If I'm doing something because I want to trick the market and make more money, yeah, that's all right. I don't know. Some people would say, no, that's speculation, and that's what stocks are, and that's what everything is. I think within the collector hobby, I would at least view that myself if I was doing it, as I wouldn't feel good about myself. But that's we can do a whole another different conversation about that. That's its whole issue. Yeah, there's always more art for sure. So disclosure, I think we were fine there. Again, some of these, I put all these examples at the time because, I was trying to show that, like we did earlier, Tony, there were so many exceptions and there's a lot of nuance to this.
Oh, it branches out so many times.
Yeah.
It really does.
If I buy one of these and I know it's an aftermarket, is that in and of itself unethical? No, everybody said no. There's nothing about that. If I buy one of these, if I buy one of these, and let's say I buy it from a bad actor who tells me, oh, this was pack inserted, and it wasn't. Then I get it and I show it in the group. And the people in the group say, oh, yeah, sorry, we know that person did it. It's not official. It's unofficial or aftermarket. Do I have an obligation now to accept that and disclose it? Even because I was tricked?
I think so, because I to carry on the deceit and the trick wouldn't make any sense to me, unless you're in it for some sort of financial gain because you wanted to get top dollar for it. But that person shouldn't have done it to you in the first place.
Yeah, but you're at once you know, you can't unknow.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's your morals. Like, how do you feel? Do you feel okay actually, having a straight face and saying, "Oh yeah, this is an official card, sure."
Yeah. I mean, again, it's a Norton's point. I get that. I understand why, when it impacts you, you're more likely to speak up. But it's a challenging question out there, right? Who gets to decide these questions? That's coming up too.
What did Bad Wizard say?
Yeah, I mean, we've sort of already talked about the last one too. If I hear, Tony, that you're like, hey, I get some pack inserted cards I didn't return, and I say, great, I'll do some work. Is that in and of itself unethical? And I think it comes back to, okay, well, what did you think about those first 2 questions? Is any art on those in and of itself a bad thing? So that's going to drive your answer here.
But see, I could always come back, and this is actually being on the side of the artists who do this. I can say, well, listen, I had the right to hold back some of these cards. I got paid diddly squat for this set. They demand so many things. You have to do things in color. They don't want headshots. They want full bodies. They want backgrounds. The pay that I'm getting isn't worth it. I have bills to pay. I have, my own, debt and crap. And they only gave me 2 or 3 APs. I can't survive on that. So I kept a few for myself. And if anybody wants them, sure, here, take it.
Yeah. I mean, again, we can all do an endless amount of mental gymnastics to convince ourselves that we're not doing anything wrong.
Exactly.
If I don't think I'm doing anything wrong, does it matter unless there's an actual legal definition that says it's wrong, right?
Yeah.
There are some things we know that could 100% lead Disney to do what they did with Tops, which is to say, you know what?
No more.
All these bad actors are causing problems for us, and our IP is being presented in a way that we don't want because we don't get to approve these. And therefore, like they do with Tops, there are no more APs. Every card must be back inserted and approved, and that's it. There are definitely some things that could cause that. Do I think artists copying other artists' cards with or without attribution matters to Disney? No. Do I think the buying and selling of blanks in and of themselves are of concern to Disney? No. Do I think that if someone draws a pornographic scene between the Scarlet Witch and Moon Knight is going to cause a problem? Yes.
Why you gotta help me like that?
Right. And I don't know for sure, but what I had heard is it was cards like that which really set off Disney when it came to Star Wars.
Well, look, Upper Deck stopped the whole zombie thing because an artist had drawn, Mary Jane's intestines being ripped out by Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So
they said that's not on brand.
Yeah. They said no more Marvel zombies, nothing of the sort. So
and those were extreme. But so then the question is, well, where is that line, right? Disney, if APs do certain characters that aren't allowed, is Disney, based on one AP of Nightcrawler, going to raise the red flag and kill APs?
Yeah,
could be.
I'm confused by some of their restrictions as to why certain characters are banned, or please don't show cleavage. I mean, if you're looking at the source material, and the source material, that's the way the costume looks. Now, I'm not into glorify her boobs or whatever. I love the character. I'm drawing the character. But, I mean, it's gotten really silly where they've gotten to the point where it's really nitpicking. Did you know one of my cards got rejected for the first time?
Really?
And it's one I had shown you. The set's not out yet.
Yes.
But because I had a very tiny Kang on the card, and he was on the rejected list. And so it got rejected because of Kang being on the card. I mean, he literally looks like a purple and green spot on it. He got rejected.
Wow, somebody was definitely. That's the problem. You do too much detail, so they were able to tell who it was. Like, wait a minute.
They haven't gotten the penises yet, so.
Uh-oh. It's the phlegm master himself.
Is he coming in?
Yeah.
Why are your glasses upside down?
Yeah, I was like, wait, is something wrong with my screen?
Yeah, no, because I put them under my hat like that when I'm not using them, but yeah, I couldn't help myself. I had to jump in.
So, Tony, a question came up for you. As an artist, where's your personal line in the sand regarding aftermarket, officially licensed stock that you were graded on? What would you do if it was proposed to you?
Now, are they talking about aftermarket on a card that I had already drawn, maybe in ink, and then colored in aftermarket? Or are they talking about a complete blank?
Right.
And me doing something on it? Because I have colored, I have done some cards in color. People have sent it to me that I've done originally in ink, and I've colored them for them. But on the back, I actually wrote TP aftermarket and then the new date on it.
A blank specifically is the question. That's the answer.
Oh, see, I don't know. If it's an AP, I would do it. If it's a inserted card, I'd have reservations on it.
Makes sense. Tim, bringing up back to intent, and that collectability and value seems to be used interchangeably. I absolutely agree. And that was heavily implied in that original post, but wasn't actually said, right? The term was collectability. And that was one of my big questions. What does that mean? What are we really sort of trying to protect with all of these rules? A lot of times it came to the integrity of the set, which to me means the ratios, the numbers, the denominators, and the official artist roster.
Well, Matt, as a collector, how do you feel about this becoming more and more evident in the field where there's a lot of blanks flying out? I mean, does it hurt your collectability of something? Again,
it's the old opinions are like balloon knots, right? Everyone has one.
is that a bumhole joke?
My personal opinion is I don't think it impacts collectability. Like unless it was an artist who did like just one on the set. I mean, collect what you love. I don't these days. I did a little bit early on when there were some really rare numbers, but I collect the cards I want, whether I don't know. I'll pay what I think it's worth. If I think it's worth $100, I pay 100, and if I think it's worth 2,000, I'll pay 2,000. And if I know something's an aftermarket, will I adjust my price? Yeah, probably. Especially if it's a higher end card. But for an average card that's at $100, am I going to care whether it's official or not? Not really. I mean, I don't think that's going to, in the long run, impact. Certainly not going to impact collectability if it means value. And again, I don't collect for that particular aspect. I mean, it impacts what I pay for it, certainly, but
Yes.
I don't keep a spreadsheet saying, oh, within 5 years, I need a 25% return on this. I don't sort of think of it that way. So,
well, how am I going to be able to resell your cards when you're gone?
True. I'll get working on that spreadsheet.
Well, I think that overall, or at least my perception was that sketch cards in these sets they were kind of the icing on the cake. They were just this little gimmick to give a little extra to the collectors.
I would say
And
yes.
to your point, Tony, and I think the point of all of this really is that at what point, I don't think sketch cards were ever the intent was never to monetize them per se. It was just supposed to be that little extra something.
It was a fun treat.
Yeah, it was,
Right,
it was just another insert.
Yeah, but it wasn't necessarily. I don't think that it was ever really looked upon as being something that had real resale value, from that, from that side of the collector's, world, right?
I agree.
I mean, so this is a great question. And it gets to one of the issues that I was concerned about. I don't know if this was an intent, but I think I was worried it could be perceived that way. So if there's a Tony Parna sketch on eBay that goes to the aftermarket, or if I get a blank and I can get an AP or a card from an artist that normally I couldn't afford, is that really the issue, right? Because is the concern that people are getting into the exclusive tier that normally they wouldn't be able to, right? If some artist cards always go for at least $2,000 and the quote unquote average collector can't get one, but if they can get a blank and get it for $500, do some people have a problem with that in and of itself, that you're sort of cheating and getting into this exclusive club that normally you wouldn't be able to?
Well, that also goes back to what I asked earlier, was those sought after artists, if they are only doing X amount, and then they get an aftermarket. Now that market's getting flooded by all these aftermarkets. So is that, again, looking at it from that perspective, is it now devaluing that artist? Right.
Yeah. And I don't think so. I haven't seen any.
Oh, I'm simply asking from an economics 101 standpoint, right? I mean, we know of artists that are on every single set, and the market is absolutely flooded with their sketches, and they can't get more than, I mean, their stuff's always all over eBay, and it's like $35 a pop,
Yeah. And that sort of ties. Oh, I just missed the question. Where'd it go? Yeah, I mean, how big of an issue really is this? Like, there's one seller, and they've got really high-priced recreations or tracings, really, of some of the best sketch cards that we've seen in the last few years. So it sticks out, but it's sort of like, is it cherry picking the data? Like, is it sort of, you're choosing the data to say, oh, crime is on the rise, and you use this like 2-day range of data. But when you look at everything, it's really just a blip in the radar. I mean, that we do see a lot, meaning maybe 50 or 60 from this guy, maybe 100. But in terms of the overall, like, I'm curious if I go to eBay, how many, if I took in Marvel sketch card, I'm curious how many there are. So results, again, this is going to include PSEs, over 13,000 results, right? So does having 100 unofficial ones, right, which is less than 1%, really move the needle on the market as a whole? Or is it just this because of the specific situation with this one person and the artists who were, doing these unattributed sketches for a while, and even though they're now attributing them, they're really just like, you can overlay them and they're like perfect copies. Is it because that pulls in so much emotion around it? Are we making this issue seem like a bigger issue than it really is?
What?
I feel like the answer is yes myself, but
Yes.
I think this is a little bit of a,
Yes.
oh God, what's it called? I'm never going to remember it. I want to say MacGuffin. That's it. I was going to say ragamuffin. That's not it. Yeah.
Just move the story forward.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. And here's a good example of rare things that have, right, because they are rare, they have maintained high values. So case incentive is a great example. Those were used to incentivize. They come with those stickers, so they're super limited. Would someone getting a hold of those stickers and being able to put them on random cards, would that change that market? Maybe that's a bad example because
man, what's wrong with you?
Right? That is so niche. But anyway, sorry. We'll be here all night with every little example I can think of.
You're putting ideas into people's
And
heads.
actually, this is a good question for you guys. I think I know the answer, but I'll let you answer it. Just a side question. So when you get the band list, it's just a list, right? They don't tell you this is guy's band because of blank.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The following characters are allowed to be drawn are on the band list, and they will give you the list of all the characters. No reason why. Just here's the list. Do not draw this person.
Yeah.
These characters.
Yeah. And Bad Wizard, I think a lot of times we've assumed that, yes, Nightcrawler, Apocalypse, and some of the ones that might be tied with Fox, we assume it's licensing. We assume that Punisher's banned because of the whole dispute with how his logo's being used. But we don't know for sure, right?
Why the Mandarin?
What's that?
Why the Mandarin?
There you go.
Yeah, I think, and to that point, you may have a character that's not on the ban list when you get the list, but by the time you finish your set, they're banned.
Yeah, I remember some people saying that happened, I think, when Gambit got banned for a while.
Yep.
It also happened with Punisher.
Actually, didn't it also happen with, I think, Nightcrawler? Definitely Punisher, though. You're right. That's where I heard them.
It was, and and there'll be even sets where they're specifically like Deadpool's a big question mark,
Yeah.
you know, because it's like you can turn around and say, oh no, it's like maybe there's a premiere set that's got Deadpool on it, and then it's like, yep, nope, no Deadpool sketches.
And
You
for a
know,
while before he was banned, isn't he the one where he couldn't appear on a card with someone else?
Yes.
yeah, Spider-Man.
Yeah, I remember that. That was a very weird one.
Yeah.
So specific.
Yeah, I think it has. I think it has to do with there was a lot of stuff going around where it's like somebody had made the leap saying that Deadpool was basically based on Spider-Man in terms of his design.
Interesting.
You know, with the eyes and even the shape of the you know the costume, you know, between the black and the red. So that was but that's not necessarily a card thing. That's a comics thing.
Yeah. Just checking if there were any other questions. Ash, welcome. What did you miss? Drama, fist fights. You know, we had 2 other people here. We already bullied them out. You know, it's been awesome. We've just been crushing dreams.
Peer pressure, peer pressure, peer pressure.
Which is a great segue into, okay, what do we do with all this? Like, what should we be doing about this whole situation, right? If any of these things are problematic, how do we call things out? Like, what's the consequence?
See, unfortunately, the people that are doing it are still going to do it, and they will always find a way to do it. And I think that's the problem. I don't think I don't think that's going to change. That's why I keep thinking that we've already gone too far with this. I mean, the rabbit hole's pretty deep.
Yep.
I wish there was a way. I mean, even putting people's like, see, you know, the sample card I showed you, the oversized, right? There are some collectors that want those cards cut down. When you cut them down, my name's off of it.
I don't know.
The oversized,
Yep.
Rittenhouse. I go, so people can pretty much get those big blanks and cut them down if even with the artist name on it. The artist name's gone after that. I don't know. I do wish it would go back or settle down or ease back a bit, but I don't know. People are passionate about their collections. People are passionate about their cards. I think it's going to be very hard for somebody who's already deep into it to say, no, I got to stop, or no, this isn't going to hurt anybody. It's just, you know, I'm getting this done for myself. I'm putting money in the artist's pocket. I'm helping them out. They're helping me out. Screw these big companies.
Right. Well, I mean, is part of it like some people, again, this is a statement is neither good nor bad, but some people, the card community and their card collection is a good part of their identity, right? This is, for some people, this is a place where if you feel important, you feel like you're an authority, and that's important for a lot of people. So anything that brings the whole hobby into question can feel like a personal attack. So I think that drives a lot of this conversation and why some people are much more passionate about it. And again, that is not that's not a positive or negative. That's just a statement.
Yeah, you're just making a statement. And it's too, and the thing is too, you're going to have the different collectors, right? You're going to have both sides of the collecting spectrum. You're going to have those that collect for themselves, collect the characters they want. You're going to have those that, you know, get a hold of these blanks that want to flip them and want to deceive and whatnot. And the thing is, I don't want to group everybody together because that's unfair. I can't do that. But yeah, I think I'm going to quit sketch cards.
Yeah. I mean, and again, if we're talking about disclosure and things, I mean, clearly I make these videos. I decided to discuss this whole topic. So clearly I enjoy the part of my identity where I can have a voice in this community. So again, I just didn't want anyone to think I'm saying that that's a bad thing. I clearly feel that way. I think anyone who takes the time to put themselves out there as a content creator, whether they're doing it because they want to be famous or they just like being part of a community, clearly that's part of our identity. So,
well, yeah, I think with all the sketch cards that you have, I think you're a little bit of an authority on what's going on.
right. I think, and the way I would say that is I don't mind using the word authority in terms of data on the hobby, but I don't think that because of the volume of sketch cards I have, that somehow my opinion matters more.
Well, let's just say you've been around the block a few times.
Yeah. I have data to share that I'm happy to share, but I'm not going to tell anyone that my opinion on the hobby is right or wrong. Yeah. And again, I'm jumping to the end of the slideshow with that.
And again, me too. This is my opinion, again, as an artist and as a producer of trading cards. It's not to be taken verbatim. People don't have to say, "Oh, that person is full of shit" and whatever, or I agree with them. It's my opinion for myself.
Right.
And that's it.
Well, and I think that goes to the crux of the question, right? It's like everybody's got an opinion, right? Mm-hmm. And and everybody may look at their collection in a different way than somebody else looks at theirs. The question is, what actions should be taken? I don't know if it's something that can be policed by the community itself.
No, I've already been called the sketch card police by a few people, just making out, just basically.
Well, I mean, it's I mean, you can call out facts and stuff, but I mean, your opinion, it's like everybody's got a right to theirs. Yeah. But as far as, again, policing the hobby, I don't think that that's up to the community itself, because to everybody's point, you collect how you want, right?
Yes.
I think as far as like going down this rabbit hole of the blanks and APs and the black market, so to speak, that's got to be taken care of by the companies. They're the ones who need to knuckle down. I mean, you get a contract, you sign it, okay, and there are no consequences when you break your contract. I mean, this is, a very minute issue, but it's always something that's driven me up the wall. Was somebody will get their blanks and they'll immediately, as they're working on them, post them on Instagram or whatever, before the set's even announced, right?
Even though in the contract it says, "Do not mention this."
Exactly.
Do not show anything.
It's an NDA.
Yes.
Well, I don't know if you've seen some of the recent ones.
Just real quick, the thing that really bothered me about that is that, aside from, the whole, the stuff that like doesn't get returned or whatever, but you get all these people that break their contract in various ways and they keep getting invited back to sets, whereas they're taking a spot from another illustrator that could be doing it and could be playing by the rules. You know what I mean? And I think that that's unfair to, like Tony mentioned earlier, you work hard to get on these sets, and, when you don't respect the rules, you shouldn't necessarily be, the first invited on the next set.
No, I agree.
I mean, and again, to each their own, everybody, you do you, but it just personally, for me, it bugs me that there are sets that I've wanted to get on and didn't, and then I see all the shenanigans going on, throughout it, and it's like, shoot, I could have been on that set.
Yep.
You know?
All right. Well, I'm going to jump through a couple of these just because I don't think we have to go through everyone. What should be done when something like this happens? And I think the answer everybody came to is, you know what? Making a post and just educating, basically, not shaming, right? Say, hey, this is what the situation is, and you should do this. This is sort of what we've accepted. Just disclose it or put this on the back, and that's great. Versus, name and shame, and everybody pig piles and says you're wrong. Because there were a couple people in that thread who weren't even named and felt the need to apologize because of cards they owned. Like, to me, that just shows that the post just got way out of control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody should be made to feel bad for what they collect.
Exactly.
And then
power of the internet.
Yeah, right. Well, and that's another question is, well, who just there's no one place where people collect. So how would you even do this, right?
Yeah.
This was a post in MCCW. Well, if someone posts a card there, it's easy because you're like, oh, I'm in this group with you. But okay, well, what if I post a quote unquote offending card in a Discord and I'm not a member of MCCW? If you call me out there, is that fair where I can't even see it or respond? And all of a sudden I find out people are talking bad things about me. Like, how do you determine, like, or if it's on Blowout, or if someone for some reason is still posting on Scoundrel, or regardless of where it is, or even if it's someone saw it at a trade show or a Comic-Con, like, how do you, there is no central location for collecting. So how can there be a central authority located somewhere that defines these things?
It can't happen. It's impossible unless, like you said, you're going to start bullying the person and saying, "Excuse me," even to contact them and say, "Oh, can you tell me a little bit more about this card?" And if they start saying, "Oh, well, this was pack pulled," and they start BSing, and you say, "Well, no, it's not. That person was never on the set or whatever."
Right.
It is going to be. I guarantee you, there's a crap load of groups that we don't even know about that cards. And
I want to mute next time, Warner.
Yeah.
What's that?
You might want to mute first next time.
Oh.
All right, back we go. So this is sort of my thesis at the end, and I don't think this was done in a bad way. I'm just going to say that I think this is where it ended up, though, which is, if you try to tell someone how to collect, you are gatekeeping, right? At the end of the day, Upper Deck, who owns the IP, and Disney, who has licensed that IP, they are really the only ones who can say what is outside of the scope of what they intended, or what is actually illegal in terms of their IP for Disney. And I've got a link here to an article. I mean, it's 11 years old at this point, but it's one of the best articles on collecting I've ever read. It's by Will Wheaton, and it's called Memo to Gatekeepers. And the summary is right there. When someone says that they love a thing you love, don't challenge them, embrace them, and love that thing together. And it was, it wasn't quite directed at this, but I still think it fits, right? Rather than telling someone that they're doing something wrong, educate them and show that you love the thing with them. I think that's I think if you are acting the same way we say, if you're lying and deceiving, that's bad. I would say if you are attempting to make people feel bad about the way they collect, that in and of itself is worse than any of the trading of blanks going on.
Yeah, respect goes both ways. It really does. So, they are people.
My opinion, not necessarily right or wrong, but I feel strongly about that. And I would recommend everyone screenshot this and go find it, or just Google Will Wheaton Memo to Gatekeepers. It's a quick and great read. And then this is what it comes down to, right? All right, well, if there's a problem within any of this, who gets to decide, right? who is the arbiter of justice in these situations? Is it the OG, as we call it, who's been around the longest? Is it the collector who's got the most sketches? Is it the collector who's got the most expensive sketches? Is it the collector who makes a post and claims a moral high ground? And what is that? Or is it just, as in most cases on the internet, the person with the loudest voice and the group behind them that'll just back up everything they say and make it an echo chamber? How do you, who? Right?
I think it's each individual person has to be responsible for their own actions.
Yep.
Yeah.
Literally.
100%.
You go to a store and a wild thing runs through your head. Is, I wonder if I can steal this gum. Why would you want to do that? It's totally up to you. Ethics. It's going to be a snowball. There's effects. There's consequences. Know what you're getting into.
Yep.
You can't turn around and sue a cigarette company for getting lung cancer.
No. Even though they
what I mean?
warn you and say this is what could happen. Why don't you know? Yeah. Well. Yeah, I definitely think.
I
don't know that I'd use necessarily the smoker analogy.
Well, no, I'm just saying that to the point of everybody's responsible for their own behavior and so on and so forth, and you own it. It's like okay, I got this aftermarket or whatever. It's like I'll own it, but again, going back to the original thought of if you're planning to deceive, then that's no bueno. But if it's like, I did get this aftermarket. It is a reproduction of something else. Own it. And that goes for both collectors and artists, right?
Yeah.
There are artists that I know of that work on aftermarkets, and they're clear. There are artists that, do an homage, per se, to somebody else's work, and they own it. They'll write it on the card. So, the onus is really on us.
Always give credit to the source material, especially when it's another artist's work.
Yeah.
That really goes without saying, because they already came up with that idea and you're basically mimicking that idea.
Yeah.
To put on a card. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I've seen people do.
There's nothing wrong with it as doing a study.
Yeah. No.
Exactly. To improve your own.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The challenge, even that, though, is contentious to some people. There was one of the artists who was doing these unattributed traces. He was called out at his Instagram, and he was gleefully defiant, saying he owes nothing to those artists. Copy anything he wants.
Oh, yeah.
And nobody's going to tell him otherwise, But there's pieces of shit in every hobby, I guess.
It's Rob Granito all over again.
Oh, yeah. I still want to get one of his sketches just because I think that's a fascinating piece of history.
Oh.
I'm sorry, one of his prints.
Yeah.
Wow. There's a name I thought I'd never hear again.
Right?
You're welcome.
It is funny how ones like that, though, that they're fake, but they become an important part of the story. You know what I mean?
Because it got so much attention, and he was doing it at cons where those artists were there. He was selling pieces with
like a matrix printer or something.
It was like, that's insane. I remember Ethan Van Skeever went up to him. I remember Ty Templeton went up to him. Like, they went by, same said, he goes, "What are you doing with my artwork?" Like, no, that's mine. He goes, "No, that's mine."
Yeah. Well, that's why that one guy says he doesn't go to cons. And it's obviously because he'd be beaten with a stick, I think, if he did. But yeah, when some of Fred and Ian's work cards were copied, they were not happy at all. And it's, I can't even fathom how that would. I'm not an artist, but I think that would. I can see that just being like very insulting. You know what I mean?
It sucks. I drew a black cat ink sketch one time, and I was selling it on eBay, and it sold. And then a few months later, I saw the same black cat, but the image was flipped. And they got rid of my name, and they were selling it as prints.
Oh,
And I contacted them. I said, "Excuse me." I go, like, what are you doing? This is my artwork. They said, "Well, no, it's my artwork. I flipped it." So I go, no, I go, it's not your artwork. You didn't do
wow.
anything to it.
That's just such a small step from, oh, it's my artwork. I put a couple words into the computer.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. This is, and just the mentality of well, I flipped it. I put it in my computer and I flipped it, and wow, crazy people.
Yeah, well, it's NFTs, right?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. But I mean, and here's sort of my summary, and then we can just go off in any direction we want. Obviously, and that's supposed to be threat, not thread. There's definitely a threat to the sketch card status quo. We saw that with Topps.
Yeah.
So there's always the possibility that Disney could go the same way. I don't see the same issues. And someone earlier made a great point that with Disney, in fact, here it is right here, Black Rose made it, that Disney probably has a little more leeway with Marvel because they're based on comics versus character likenesses, excuse me. But, there's problems, but I don't think it's up to individuals to police it on behalf of corporations.
Now, would that affect the MCU sets? Because are there not sketch cards in the MCU sets?
There are, but the artists who were invited, actually, no. Even on the MCU sets, you're not allowed typically to do likenesses. Likenesses.
Okay.
Likenesses, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense.
Look, there's always going to be bad actors. If you're a liar or attempting fraud, you're bad. If you're selling tons of UD's properties, which could have been gotten through backdoor processes, that's not great. Let's just put it that way. But the real issue is, if people go beyond the limits of good taste or push the restrictions that are on there. And again, if it's a character, I don't think that's going to cause APs to go away. If you're, if it's the guns and cleavage, okay, maybe. But if it's, over the top, like we said, that could be a problem. But at the end of the day, there needs to be a line. No people should control how collecting is done, and no one ever should feel badly about their collection or how they collect.
No.
And that's what bothered me about the whole thread. Not where it started, because I think it started with positive intentions, but some of the comments that were in there and where the direction was going with some of them, and setting it up that, that certain people should be the ones to decide what is or isn't right. That just didn't sit well with me. So Here we are.
Well, we got to get rid of the malice and the fraud in these.
Oh, absolutely. There's no one at all argues that. If someone is being deceitful, they should be called out. If they're called out, they continue to do it, they should absolutely be removed from communities, and people should rightfully shun them.
Yes.
Shun.
Shame.
The barrel.
Now, do you feel that Upper Deck has kind of already started to step back with sketch cards?
Oh, absolutely. And whether it's because of this or whether it's because of just economics, I'm not sure. And I'm sure it's a pain in the butt to manage at scale.
Mm-hmm.
But they've gone from, when was the last time we got box sets? Probably around 2017, 2018.
A while ago, yeah.
Yeah, and then it became only Premier Masterpieces with the guaranteeds, and then even this year, Masterpieces doesn't have it. Now, the only set with guaranteed sketches per box is Premier. For now, who knows if that will change.
That could change. That's true.
But so for a sketch collector like myself, it hurts. But there's still plenty of sketches already in circulation. So there's never going to be, I'm never going to run out of sketches to look at and collect. So
no. Why are you getting rid of so many of your sketch cards?
So twice in the past, I have done, I use the actual defined term. I've done a decimation where I forced myself to sell 10%, just as a way to sort of keep it current and keep it healthy and realign my collecting goals. So I think I did that in 20 and 22. And this year I was going to do another 10%, and I did. And then at OAX, one person bought the entire 10%.
Telling me that.
So I said, oh, well, maybe I should do a little more. So, I got a whole bunch of these boxes here, and I've been doing some sales. So I want to say I'm willing to sell up to another 1,500. So, but again, I'm still going to have a stupid amount after that. So
I hope these are cards that you're willing to part with.
Oh yeah, no, that's it. It basically, my process was literally this. I'd grab a stack and I'd be like, keep, sell, keep. And I did that, and I keep going through. So when I was doing the sale last night, I probably went through about 600 in total, and I came up with another stack. And I'm like, you know what? As I relook at this, I want to keep this one. I keep this one.
Yeah,
so,
okay.
Yeah. So
you're not getting rid of any of your Dannies, are you?
I was willing to get rid of a few Danny that for whatever reason didn't fit in. I think maybe two, and I think they were both in group shots where it just didn't really make sense. So I didn't like the composition, but yeah, very, very few there. The farting bear is still safe.
Yeah.
I'm never gonna let that one go.
Yeah. Well, it's the story behind it.
Yeah, I mean it's like a Granito, right? It's part of the history of that set. Just for a totally different reason.
Did you end up selling that Miss Marvel with the wiener?
It's still around. Do you want me to send it to you? I'll trade it to you. Yeah, I remember when I was going through them all and I looked at that, and like the top half is like really, it's awesome. And then I was like, what is that? Okay. And again, I'm sure it was completely accidental, but yeah, it's there we go. So there we go. There you go. You're saving up for a trip to Dollywood. There you go. Yeah.
Ooh, I'd go see her.
Well, if you ever come to a Florida convention, you can stop along the way.
I'm planning
Southern U.S. experience.
I'm planning for 2025. So for AOX or OAX or whatever it's called. One of those.
Yeah, last night.
Yeah, is that a roving thing or
no? At least for now, the only one is going to continue. I think to take place in Orlando. I believe it hasn't been announced yet, but my understanding is it is highly likely to remain.
I saw a bunch of posts on it, and I was like, "What is this OAX that everybody's talking about?"
Oh, it was so much fun.
I saw an interview. Is it Bill Cox that was running it?
Yes, I believe that's his name.
Okay, he had a stream going on, and he had Jimmy Palmiotti, Amanda Connor, Adam Hughes, and Allison Sohn, and they were talking about some of the highlights. And these artists were saying it was a very busy yet laid back con, and they said it was amazing. And Allison said, "We'll do more in the future. Just sign us up." They said it was amazing. They said even the people there were amazing. People weren't rude. They were really nice. It was nice chatting up with people.
For the show itself, what they did well, there are two things that stuck out to me based on other like comic conventions. Number one is the aisles were like 3 times as wide as a normal Comic-Con. And I know that sounds stupid, but if you've been to one of those Comic-Cons where you're like a sardine, that makes a difference.
Yeah.
And they were limited to 500 tickets. So the crowd was small, but it was people who really wanted to be there.
Now, the place that they...
Not window shoppers.
I was going to say, the place that they held it at, is there room for expansion, or is it a set size?
Not a lot, unless there were a bunch of rooms in the back. So I suppose they could, like, there was so it's like a giant box, and then you go back, and then 2 hallways split off, and there were a bunch of halls back there. There was a hall directly straight ahead that wasn't used. So in theory, I think they could, but it felt like it was a pretty good size, and it was I think it was a good mix of artists and dealers. Like, it wasn't over the top with dealers, and every dealer was laser focused. It was all OA, OA, OA. It's not like you didn't have 20 t-shirt vendors and 10 pop figures every other booth. You know what I mean? No, it was all comic art.
There wasn't a lady there set up making hats for cats?
I don't know.
No,
I can't tell if you're serious. If they were, I missed it.
At one of our cons, I was actually sitting beside a woman that was doing that. It was so weird. She was knitting these little things and hats for cats, and I'm like, why am I here?
You know what though? She probably sold a ton of them, right?
She did better than I did. So, I said, Elaine, do you know how to sew? You know how to knit?
We're going off topic here.
Sorry.
Wow, I don't. Jeez. Question for you: any Comic Cons in Canada?
They have a big one called Fan Expo Canada. That's in August. I used to do those shows, but now the person in charge of Artist Alley doesn't like sketch card artists.
I remember you said that. Yeah.
So I haven't been going anymore.
And they're the ones who kind of either took over or became Wizard World, right?
Yep, they took over all of the Wizard World cons.
Yeah, no, they run the Boston one now. Yeah, he say wiener. There you go.
He say wiener.
Cons are definitely a mixed bag.
Yeah.
All right. So Ryan was at same location the week before. Perfect. Definitely room to expand. Nice.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
No, you can always go back, Vantage Lord. I do appreciate the 30 or so people who stuck around for this. I know it's not the most exciting topic, and I'll go into much more card focused stuff in the future. But I thought this was a good excuse to relaunch the series, and make it topical.
Dan, is there a big con in Edmonton?
Now we wait for the lag delay.
No, we wait for it to answer.
Sketches with weird genital regions. Okay, wow, we're going off the reservation here.
Oh, the big packages. Yeah, like the Spider-Man one.
Yeah. That was quite amusing. That was definitely quite amusing.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah, there you go. All right, well, I think it's probably a good time to wrap it up. It's been a full 2 hours. Again, thank you to both of my guests for joining. I just looked at your little subtitles there. Very nice. Oh. Josh, thanks for coming and going through the phlegm stage. I appreciate you. I know you're not feeling well. He said to answer that question, usually in late September about the con. Jay's asking, Tony, do you have a schedule of the cons you'll be attending?
Yeah.
And the group will be the best Marvel card focus cons in your opinion.
We should do a section on cons.
Yeah. The two cons I can think of specifically for Marvel cards would be the Philly Non-Sports Card Show, which they do twice a year in April and October, I believe. And it used to be in Philly proper. Now it's slightly north of Philadelphia. And the Chicago. Again, at the end of these streams, my accent starts to come out.
The Chicago.
The Tri-City Non-Sports Card Show, which I believe, Mr. Warner, you were at recently, right?
Yeah. I did the last one. It was the last show that Ed was doing. So he invited me out to do that.
That's a blow to the. Actually, did Ed run it?
Yeah.
Oh, so it's done then. If he's out.
No.
The show's
still going on.
Okay.
He's just not doing it anymore because he's out in Arizona.
Yeah.
So for him to make the trip to Philly to Chicago and then all the way back across the country.
Is this Ed Webb?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I wish we had, customer-friendly card shows up here, but
yeah. Well, even those two, the Marvel presence. I can't speak to Chicago because I've never been there, but at Philly, it is all cards. But I really had no idea what non-sports cards really meant until I went there. Like
Yeah.
Marvel's tiny, GPK is a little bigger than Pokemon, but all like the vintage movie cards from the 60s, I had no idea so many of those things existed. It was actually fantastic to see.
Yeah, somebody gifted me an old Jaws set from the first movie.
Nice.
I was like, I didn't even know these cards existed. It's insane.
It's funny, I can already like guess what the titles are. Like there's definitely a card that says we're gonna need a bigger boat, right?
Yep.
With all the boats going.
This was not a boating accident.
Yeah. Is that Chicago? Yeah. That's pretty much how I sound after these streams, right?
Matt needs a nap.
Yeah. All right. Well, again, thank you to my guests. Thank you to the viewers.
Thank you for having me on.
I used to have. I was trying to always come up with a saying, and the one I kept up with was "keep it sketchy," but it's because it sounds so off.
I thought this was called "I'm So Itchy."
So I'm going to end with insert phrase here, and we'll figure out what it
I'm happy.
is. Exactly. All right. Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
See ya.